Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me here again today. With the Olympics that has just wrapped up, I wanted to talk about this case because it's not only relevant in gymnastics but in many other sports as well. So I'm sure many of you may have watched something on Netflix called Athlete A, and this was about American athletes who were targeted by people in positions of authority and in positions that these athletes thought that they could trust. And not only is there Athlete A on Netflix, but there is also an excellent podcast. And I say excellent in terms of its production, the cast, the writing, everything behind the podcast is really well done. But the topics in this podcast is very deep. It's very difficult to listen to. And that is called My Only Story, which is a South African-based podcast. But the podcast My Only Story is excellent, and I will link it down below if you want to listen to it. But all these stories have a similar theme. And that theme is that people are put in charge of athletes, children of varying ages, but they use their power incredibly poorly, and these athletes or these children are put into positions where they shouldn't be, and they are incredibly vulnerable, and sadly they pay the price. So with all of that being said, let's get into today's case.
Intended for mature audiences only.
Today we are heading to the Free State. It was also known as the Orange Free State back in the day, but the Free State is a very flat, grassy area. It is very rich in soil and has a great climate for farming. So Free State is where a lot of our farmers in South Africa live and where our farming occurs in general. There are very small towns in the Free State where everyone knows everyone's business, but we all know that within small towns, these areas are so vast that some secrets are easily kept quiet for decades. For our case today, we are focusing on gymnastics and how one man allegedly physically, sexually, and emotionally abused multiple gymnasts in a club in the Free State. To be a successful gymnast, there is a very close bond between your coach and yourself and how much you rely on each other. But that line was blurred when allegations of horrendous acts were coming out, and Derek Bezuidenhout was in serious hot water. Derek Bezuidenhout, by all accounts, was a fantastic coach. The Free State really relied on him, and they were doing very well as a province as a whole in gymnastics because of their coaching staff in general. But Derek, who was mainly based on trampolines, was excellent in his field, and he was helping a lot of young athletes to be very successful in this discipline. Derek Bezuidenhout was also married to the boss of the company that he worked for, so he was basically married to the boss's daughter. But Derek was allegedly one of the most qualified gymnastic coaches within his area of expertise, and that's why he was so highly regarded. And there was a long queue of people who wanted to be taught by Derek. And if you heard that he was the best in his field, why would you not want your child to have that opportunity to be taught by the best? But not only were most sports, a lot of athletes start incredibly young and they build their profession up over the years. But it all got incredibly heated because there were a lot of serious allegations coming out about Derek. And there were already murmurs and rumblings in the gymnastics community about what Derek was doing, but a lot of people swept it under the rug because Derek was the best. And sadly, when we saw a video like that, and a lot of these children were spoken to later on after a lot of the allegations came out, a lot of these children said that they thought what Derek was doing was a mistake. They thought that this was just something that wouldn't happen again. They didn't understand what was going on because Derek was an incredibly affectionate coach. He was very lovely to the children, but he was a little handsy to some of them as well. And he was also very much a father figure to a lot of these children. They spent hours with him almost every day, long hours on the weekend. So if you think of a child seeing this person every day for hours and hours, you begin to bond quite closely with them. So they figured that it was just a misunderstanding and they weren't clicking what this grown man was doing was very wrong. A lot of the children who this was happening to knew what was happening. They talked about it amongst each other, but that's all that really happened. It stayed as locker room talk between the girls and nothing more. But as we know on this channel, a lot of people start off by doing small things. Maybe they'll start by stealing something from the shop and it ends up becoming bigger and bigger and they eventually turn to murder, which is a very extreme case from starting to steal. But with Derek, he started off small. So if they were training, he would touch their back. A couple weeks later, he would move further down the back, for example, and it would eventually grow and grow. So the children who allegedly this was all happening to, it was very gradual, and he was always testing the water to see how the children would react. And allegedly Derek was always pushing boundaries. And sadly, a few months after the attack on the clip that we saw earlier on the young girl, Derek would go on to again in Louise's life when he came banging on her front door demanding that she take back what she said, and it wasn't true. Allegedly, it came out that the owners in the club heard all of these murmurs that were going on about Derek and the allegations that were brought towards him. Allegedly, the owners of the club were informed about Louise's and he was now being looked into. But Derek was also being investigated about other crimes that had taken place within the club, such as verbal and physical abuse. Allegedly, one of the students really wasn't enjoying the trampoline part of her training, and she no longer wanted to do it. And she told Eric that she really wants to quit because this really isn't what she wants to do. And allegedly, in front of all his other students that day, parents I do not think were at the club at the time. It was just him and the girls that he was training. But allegedly, what he did to this young girl after she said that she wanted to quit was that he held her down and burnt her feet with a lighter. But no one dared to stand up against him. What were they going to do? He was a very athletic, tall, well-built man, and you think that these young girls, sometimes children, have any chance to stand up to him after how they just saw this physical violence against this young child. But remember, Derek is the best coach and they cannot lose him. But because some of the girls were really horrified at what they had seen, a lot of them were going to their parents and telling their parents what they had happened, and a lot more of these parents were coming forward to the head of the clubs and that this shouldn't be happening. No coach should be laying any hands or anything on any of the children. But with all of these allegations coming forward and with so many reports coming about Derek, nothing was done. And for example, in 2013, there were allegations that there was a massive gymnastics competition that was happening, and a very young girl, probably early teenage years, possibly at the age of 12 to 14, she had arrived to this competition with Derek in her pajamas. So she didn't arrive at the same time as Derek. She got out of the same car alone with Derek in her pajamas, and they were very happily laughing and joking with each other. The judges at this event thought that this was incredibly inappropriate. They thought that you do not have any relation to this young girl. Why are you bringing her from a sleepover at your house alone? So this was reported to the Free State Gymnastics Board, and nothing really happened. Report this allegation to the Free State Gymnastics Board, said that he did get a reply, but it wasn't really to any detriment towards Derek. He said that the reply was based on, he understands that this is happening and this is not the only allegation that is coming forward, but what are we supposed to do? This is Derek. This is the best gymnastics coach we've ever had. What about the Free State? Allegations of another sexual assault and victim came forward to the Free State Gymnastics Board, and she said that this happened in 2017 for her. She said that it started off by Derek touching her inappropriately during routines, or when she was going through puberty, he would allegedly say, "I see that you are becoming a big girl now," while looking down at her chest. She also said that he would always bring up sexual jokes or turn the conversations very sexual. This young girl that we are talking about now did not lay a charge against Derek, but they also said that she couldn't because there isn't enough evidence to do so. And these were also reported to the bigger gymnastics federations of South Africa as well, but the allegations were very much swept under the rug, allegedly. Really were not going to give up. So many of them were scarred mentally, physically by this man, allegedly. And so many of them did not come forward because they just didn't want to face how many years of ridicule by people because nothing was being done. And also, a lot of these victims just didn't want to go through the process again and again and tell their story again and again to adults who didn't believe them. But in 2021, a lot of victims did come forward, or enough victims came forward, that there was mounting pressure not only on the Gymnastics Federation of South Africa. So in the end and overall, the South African board, or the South African Federation of Gymnastics, they did end up suspending the management team, or the owners of the place where Derek worked at. However, they would only suspend them until they wrote a letter of apology. And this letter would need to come to each victim that was allegedly or potentially harassed or sexually abused by Derek. And all they needed to do was write a letter. And once they sent this letter, they could open up their gymnastics business again. Play this next clip because Yanni, who was the one who responded to the judge, who reported that inappropriate exchange, or what they saw when they saw Derek and that young girl walking into this competition together while she was in her pajamas. Yanni, who was the one who replied to the judge about what about the Free State, he, by the way, was never suspended or looked at all. Derek ended up taking his own life. There will not be any justice for any of these victims, and sadly they will never have closure either. And it is incredibly sad about what Louise said, that if you keep having the same people in charge, you will never really see any change. And that is a very scary thought for the young athletes, being male or female, going through this entire gymnastics process, training from a very young age and trying to be the best athletes they can be, where they are not really safeguarded within their profession. But let me know what you think down below. I hope that you're all doing well. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.